Should we be worried about the Switch 2 because of tariffs? I have been thinking about this a lot and kind of wanted to make a quick video talking about it because there's a lot of interesting angles about even if tariffs don't come, why it could cause problems, but they probably will come. They're going to be very weird, though. There's a lot of time between now and when they would come for companies to lobby and maybe avoid them. But let's get into it. Trump is president-elect. He's going to become president in January of 2025. And one of the things he mentioned a lot on the campaign trail, other than his hatred for immigrants and trans people, was his economic plan. And his plan is we're going to win by putting tariffs on other countries. Tariffs are taxes. They're taxes that companies pay to bring products from other countries into this country. Those companies that do that job are importers. Usually they import stuff from other countries. So they bring them here. These are companies that are typically have some presence in the United States, and they see these taxes as cost that they must pass on to consumers. This necessarily raises the cost of products that you pay for at retailers and online. It's a bad economic policy. I really do not think tariffs are almost ever a good idea. There is some argument for it to protect industries in the United States where that employ a lot of people. Biden was doing tariffs for the auto industry, specifically tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles to protect the burgeoning electric vehicle market in the United States. I personally disagree with even that. Even though I want to protect those jobs, I say do what China does and give a lot of money to those companies so you could subsidize them to make them even more competitive globally so that they can afford to sell their vehicles for less. And that would increase the adoption rate of electric vehicles. It would have a knock-on effect that would be really good. That's a lot harder to do. It's very easy to pass tariffs. So I get why that happens. I disagree with Biden doing it. And I deeply disagree with Trump's plan, which is a sort of across-the-board tariff. He wants to do a 20% tax on all imports from all countries, and then a 60% rate on goods from China, which a lot of consoles are produced in China. Not all. I think Nintendo does a lot in like Vietnam, things like that. But this is him just talking on the campaign trail, so this stuff could look very different. That 60% thing could apply to anything that has like a chip made in China or Hong Kong, which or Taiwan, which maybe they would count as China or something like that. There's a lot of ins and outs, but mostly just think of it this way. Everything is going to be taxed as it comes into the country, and that cost will get passed on to consumers. Now, there's no guarantee that these tariffs will happen. Trump is very fickle. He's got a baby brain. He gets very distracted. But what do we know about him? He values loyalty over everything else, and that means that if a company has or an industry has a lobbying firm that maybe gave a lot of money to the Republican Party or a lot of money to the Trump campaign, they might be able to lobby the Trump administration for exceptions to the tariffs. A lot of companies are, not a lot, every company, every industry is already doing this, and they're all being told the same thing. Did you give money? Did you pass the loyalty test? It's a lot of bullshit. It really sucks. That's the way it's working right now. Of course, this is the way it was going to work. But what does this really mean for Nintendo and the Switch 2? The Switch 2 is in a really weird position because there's a lot of uncertainty. All those things we just mentioned, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if Trump is even going to do tariffs, when he's going to do tariffs, what they'll look like, how much they'll cost, what countries they will apply to, what industries they'll apply to. Will it just apply to raw materials? The point is, we don't know. There's uncertainty. And that uncertainty can be an issue itself. In fact, it maybe is the biggest problem right now for something like the Switch 2 from Nintendo, because they want to get this thing out and they want to know what their costs are going to be so they can set a price, set a release date, and go. Why is that a problem? Because if you don't know how much you're going to have to pay in taxes to import the video game system to your biggest market, the United States is by far their biggest market, or, maybe not by far these days, but definitely their biggest market. And if you don't know what the tax situation is going to look like, you're going to continue to hold back. So Nintendo might have had a pretty good idea of what the release date and the marketing plan was going to look like had a different person won. But with Trump in place, they might be saying, okay, we need to wait and see before we can make these decisions, because let's, just think out a scenario here. Let's say that Nintendo picks a price for the Switch 2 now and tries, this is something I've heard a lot of people in my super chats when we do our podcast. They mention, hey, maybe Nintendo will rush this thing out so they can get out ahead of the tariffs. Well, that won't matter, because if the tariffs come later, the thing will just get taxed at that price going forward. And the Nintendo will be like, oh shit, now we have to raise prices on this thing so that we can pay for these tariffs. So if they put the thing out now and they put it at a price that is like pretty acceptable, pretty competitive, and then tariffs come down, Nintendo will be in a situation where it's losing quite a bit of money on each console sold. So they'll raise the price. And they don't want to do that, because raising the price, people don't care why you raise the price. Even if everyone will understand that these prices are being increased because of tariffs, they will be mad, and it'll look bad for the Switch 2, and it could hurt sales very deeply. And so they will want to wait until they know exactly what the tariffs are going to be, so that they could build that tariff tax into the price so that they can weather that, whatever it's going to be. Now, there is an alternative. And it's maybe, okay, wait until we know what the tariffs are and then set the price at that point, like I just said, or try to predict what the tariffs are going to be and maybe set a higher price now than you were going to before if someone else would have won, so that you could just maybe, if you have to, raise the price $20 instead of $100 to help offset things. And that's maybe a little bit easier to get away with, or maybe set it at a price high enough that it actually, you're making enough profit that you can afford any sort of tax that might come down, even if it is 60%. And that means an extremely high price for the Switch 2 out of the gate. Nintendo will want to avoid that, of course, because they are still going to have to compete with legacy consoles like the PS5 and the Xbox Series consoles that might look very strange compared to a $500, $600 Switch 2. Nintendo will not want to do that if they can avoid it. But if they don't know what's going to happen with tariffs, they might have to set it like $450, $500 and just accept that, because they will not know what's going to happen with tariffs, and they want to avoid having to raise the price later. They can always lower it without issue. So if they set a higher price, tariffs don't happen, and it's clear they won't happen, then Nintendo will be like, okay, we set it at $500 and now we can afford to drop the price. These companies don't like lowering prices for consoles these days, so they might just keep it at $500. So again, we're talking about what Nintendo has to do, but as consumers, all of this is bad news. There is no, oh, well, here's how we can skate out of this. And other than Nintendo rolls the dice, sets a low price that they always wanted to set, and hopes that tariffs never happen or that they can get some kind of exception. Outside of that, the most likely scenario here is this: Nintendo chooses a relatively higher price than it would have, and it waits even longer than it was going to announce specific details about the Switch 2. It might still, they've already promised to reveal this thing before the end of March 2025. They never said anything about a release date or a price. Those things might get pushed further back to give them more time to understand the economic and tax landscape. And in that case, we are waiting longer for this system, and it will be more expensive. It's just bad on top of bad. And some of you might think I'm saying this because I dislike Trump, and I do. I find him to be one of the most embarrassing things that this country has ever done. Shameful, childish, and just an all around shameful thing. But I dislike tariffs in general. I've everything I've learned about tariffs, they're very hard to get rid of once they're in place. We've had there's something called the chicken tax, which is I think it was maybe Japan, some other country, maybe Germany, a different country put a tax on the United States when we were trying to send cheap, tasty, really good chicken to this other country, and they put a tariff on our chicken, and we responded by putting tariffs on pickup trucks. And this is 70 years ago or something like this. And to this day, we still have that tariff. And it's why the Ford F-150 is by far the best selling truck, because other countries can't compete as easily. They cannot set competitive prices. Like, their trucks are just as good, if not better, in a lot of other countries, and they're much cheaper. But here they have to sell at a higher price, or they have to ship the parts here and manufacture it here, which adds costs. And so they don't have the ability to compete the way they want to. And it likely makes sense for the consumer to get rid of a tariff like that. And it's made sense for a very long time, because we would have more options, more competition, and better pricing. But it's very hard to get rid of a tariff, because people have built industries around these things and hired a lot of people. And you want to take away those protections for an industry, you're going to be the politician to do that. It doesn't happen that way. So tariff gets put in place to protect industries here, and it causes the cost of consoles to go up. We might be stuck with that for 30 years, 40 years, something like that. Might be stuck with it forever. So I dislike that. I deeply dislike that. It's not good economic policy, and it is going to make it harder for us to get a switch to in a timely manner, which is maybe more important to me. So yeah. If you have any thoughts, though, definitely leave them in the comments. Want to hear what people think. Want to hear your questions. Would love to talk about this more. But yeah, I think that's where I'm sitting right now with this, and I'm gonna keep considering. I'm gonna keep looking in to see what news sites and the reporting is saying about how U.S. industries are feeling about this. But at the end of the day, the dude likes to look tough, and he likes to look tough against China, especially. And he thinks this makes him look tough, when it really just makes him look very stupid, because he is. So yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I appreciate everybody. As always, you can get more from me over at giantbomb.com. Check out the Giant Bombcast every Tuesday. I also do Game Mess Decides on Thursdays with Mike Minotti. We also do Last and Then 10 Dogs. That's his podcast that I'm on. It's a good time. We have a lot of conversations like this, and a lot of really dumb conversations as well, because we're dumb as well. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself, and goodbye.